Everyone thinks Power Automate is an integration engine. It isn't. It's a convenient factory of automated mediocrity, fine for reminders, terrible for revenue-grade systems. Yet somehow, professionals keep building mission-critical workflows inside it like it's Azure Logic apps with a fresh coat of blue paint. Spoiler alert, it's not. People assume scaling just means add another connector, as though Microsoft snuck auto-load balancing into a subscription UI. The truth, Power Automate is brilliant for personal productivity, but allergic to industrial-scale processing. Throw 10,000 records at it, and it panics. By the end of this, you'll understand exactly where it fails, why it fails, and what the professionals use instead. Consider this less of a tutorial and more of a rescue mission for your sanity, your service limits, and the poor intern who has to debug your overnight approval flow. The citizen developer myth. Power Automate was designed for what Microsoft politely calls citizen developers. Translation: bright, non-technical users automating repetitive tasks without begging it for help. It was never meant to be the backbone of enterprise automation. Its sweet spot is the PowerPoint-level tinkerer who wants a Teams message when someone updates a list, not the operations department syncing thousands of invoices between SAP and Dataverse. But the design itself leads to a seductive illusion. You drag boxes, connect triggers, and it just works. Once. Then someone says, let's roll this out company-wide. That's when your cheerful prototype mutates into a monster, one that haunts SharePoint APIs at 2 a.m. ease of use disguises fragility. The interface hides technical constraints under a coat of friendly blue icons. You'd think these connectors are infinite pipes. They're actually drinking straws. Each one throttled, timed, and suspiciously sensitive to loops longer than 8 hours. The average user builds a flow assuming unlimited throughput. Then they hit concurrency caps, step count limits, and the dreaded rate limit exceeded message that eats entire weekends. Picture a small HR onboarding flow designed for 10 employees per month. It runs perfectly in testing. Now the company scales to 1,000 hires, bulk uploading documents, generating IDs, provisioning accounts, all at once. Suddenly the flow stalls halfway because it exceeded the 5,000 actions per day limit. Congratulations, your automated system just became a manual recovery plan. The problem isn't malicious design, it's misalignment of intent. Microsoft built Power Automate to democratize automation, not replace integration engineers. But business owners love free labor, and when a non-technical employee delivers one working prototype, executives assume it can handle production demands. So they keep stacking steps, approvals, emails, database updates, condition branches, until one day the platform politely refuses. Here's the part most people miss. It's not Power Automate's fault. You're asking a hobby tool to perform marathon workloads. It's like towing a trailer with a scooter. Heroic for 200 meters, catastrophic at highway speed. The lesson is simple. Simplicity doesn't equal scalability. Drag and drop logic doesn't substitute for throughput engineering. Yet offices everywhere are propped up by Power Automate flows held together with retries and optimism. But remember, the issue isn't that Power Automate is bad. It's that you're forcing it to do what it was never designed for. The real professionals know when to migrate because at enterprise scale, convenience becomes collision, and those collisions come with invoices attached. 2 invisible failure points. Now we reach the quiet assassins of enterprise automation, 2 invisible failure points that lurk behind every fully operational flow. The first is throttling, the second is licensing. Both are responsible for countless mysterious crashes people misdiagnose as Microsoft being weird. No, it's Microsoft being precise while you were being optimistic. Let's start with throttling because that's where dreams go to buffer indefinitely. Every connector in Power Automate, SharePoint, Outlook, Dataverse, you name it, comes with strict limits. Requests per minute, calls per day, parallel execution caps. When your flow exceeds those thresholds, it doesn't slow down. It simply stops. Picture oxygen being cut off mid-sentence. The flow gasps, retries half-heartedly, and then dies quietly in run history where nobody checks until Monday. This is when some hero decides to fix it by increasing trigger frequency, blissfully unaware that they're worsening the suffocation. It's like turning up the treadmill speed when you're already out of air. Connectors are rate limited for a reason. Microsoft's cloud doesn't want your unoptimized approval loop hogging regional bandwidth at 4 a.m. And yes, that includes your 4 a.m. invoice batch job due in accounting before sunrise. It will fail, and it will fail spectacularly, silently, elegantly, disastrously. Now switch lenses to licensing, the financial twin of throttling. If throttling chokes performance, licensing strangles your budget. Power Automate has multiple licensing models, per user, per flow, and the dreaded premium connectors category. Each looks manageable at small scale, but expand one prototype across departments and suddenly your finance team is hauling calculators up a hill of hidden multipliers. Here's the trick. Each flow instance, connector usage, and environment boundary triggers cost implications. Run the same flow under different users and everyone needs licensing coverage. That free department automation now costs more per month than an entire Azure subscription would have. It's automation's version of fine print. No one reads it until the finance report screams. Think of the system as a pair of lungs. Throttling restricts oxygen intake. Licensing sells you expensive oxygen tanks. You can breathe carefully and survive, or inhale recklessly and collapse. Enterprises discover this break-even moment the hard way, the exact second when Logic Apps or Azure Functions would have been cheaper, faster, and vastly more reliable. Let me give you an especially tragic example. A mid-sized company built a Power Automate flow to handle HR onboarding, document uploads, SharePoint folder creation, email provisioning, Teams invites. It ran beautifully for the first month. Then quarterly hiring ramped up, pushing hundreds of executions through daily. Throttling hit, approval stalled, and employee access didn't generate. HR spent 2 days manually creating accounts. Auditors called it a process control failure. I'd call it predictable negligence disguised as innovation. And before you rush to blame the platform, remember Power Automate is transparent about its limits if you actually read the documentation buried 5 clicks deep. The problem is that most so-called citizen developers assume the cloud runs on goodwill instead of quotas. Spoiler, it doesn't. This is the point where sensible engineers stop pretending Power Automate is a limitless serverless miracle. They stop duct taping retries together and start exploring platforms built for endurance. Because Power Automate was never meant to process storms of data, it was designed to send umbrellas when it drizzles. For thunderstorms, you need industrial-grade automation, a place where flows don't beg for mercy at scale. And that brings us neatly to the professional's answer to all this chaos, the tool born from the same architecture but stripped of training wheels. When you've inhaled enough throttling errors and licensing fees, it's time to graduate. Enter Logic Apps, where automation finally behaves like infrastructure rather than an overworked intern with too many connectors and not enough air. Enter Logic Apps, the professional alternative. Let's talk about the grown-up version of Power Automate, Azure Logic Apps. Same genetic material, completely different lifestyle. Power Automate is comfort food for the citizen developer. Logic Apps is protein for actual engineers. It's the same designer, same workflow engine, but instead of hiding complexity behind friendly icons, it hands you the steering wheel and asks if you actually know how to drive. Here's the context. Both services are built on the Azure workflow engine. The difference is packaging. Power Automate runs in Microsoft's managed environment, giving you limited knobs, fixed throttling, and a candy-coated interface. Logic Apps strips away the toys and exposes the raw runtime. You can define triggers, parameters, retries, error handling, and monitoring, all with surgical precision. It's like realizing the Power Automate sandbox was just a fenced-off corner of Azure this whole time. In Power Automate, your flows live and die inside an opaque container. You can't see what's happening under the hood, except through the clunky run history screen that updates 5 minutes late and offers the investigative depth of a fortune cookie. Logic Apps, by contrast, hands you application insights. A diagnostic telescope with queryable logs, performance metrics, and alert rules. It's observability for adults. Parallelism. Logic Apps treats it like a fundamental right. You can fan out branches, scale runs independently, and stitch complex orchestration patterns without tripping arbitrary flow limits. In Power Automate, concurrency feels like contraband, the kind of feature you unlock only after 3 licensing negotiations and a prayer. And yes, Logic Apps integrates with the same connectors, SharePoint, Outlook, Dataverse, even custom APIs, but without the consumer babysitter tier in the middle. Where Power Automate quietly pauses and retries to protect itself, Logic Apps simply executes exactly as you instruct. If it fails, you can route the failure, handle it, or send it somewhere productive instead of looping into polite ambiguity. Here's an engineering metaphor, since that seems to help certain audiences. Power Automate is the IKEA version of integration. It's friendly, approachable, and requires only mild profanity to assemble. Logic Apps is commissioning a carpenter. You still get a table, but you decide the wood, thickness, finish, and leg geometry. One you brag about building, the other becomes furniture that lasts. Now, some people worry Azure means more confusing. It isn't, assuming you can endure a user interface with fewer emojis. The Logic Apps designer opens right in the Azure portal and looks eerily familiar. Same shapes, same lines, connecting actions. The difference is that every property, every execution option, every setting is open for inspection. You can version it with source control, deploy through pipelines, and roll back like civilized professionals. Cost is another magic reveal. Power Automate charges per user or per flow, meaning you're renting convenience by the month. Logic Apps runs on a consumption model. You pay only when your flow executes and only for the pieces you use. If no one triggers the process that hour, cost equals 0. Imagine explaining that to finance and watching their eyes light up because someone finally brought predictability to automation spend. The big picture benefit, however, isn't money, it's governance. In enterprise environments, compliance teams want visibility. Who deployed what, where data flows, how failures are surfaced. Power Automate hides that world behind hyperlinks labeled activity details. Logic Apps aligns with enterprise architecture standards, resource groups, managed identities, network isolation, role-based access control. Translation: actual IT can monitor without guesswork. And if you're wondering when to switch, here's the diagnostic checklist. When a flow exceeds 20 conditions, triggers from multiple sources, manages external service calls, or touches sensitive data repositories, you're past the hobby phase. Migrate immediately. Export the definition from Power Automate, import it into Logic Apps, and let Azure handle scale. Add application insights for monitoring, and you suddenly have an auditable, maintainable system instead of an unpredictable experiment. A quick real-world glimpse. One financial services firm moved its nightly transaction batching, originally teetering on Power Automate, into Logic Apps. Same logic, but now orchestrated through parallel pipelines with retry policies. Processing time dropped from 90 minutes to under 10, and cost dropped by 30%. The engineer responsible said, "It feels like Power Automate finally hit adulthood." So yes, Logic Apps is essentially Power Automate that grew up, got a proper job, learned fiscal discipline, and stopped crashing during peak hours. It's built for sustained workload, dependable execution, and transparent billing. Once you experience that control, going back to Power Automate feels like coding in crayons. Of course, not everyone wants to abandon the friendly environment altogether. Some workflows still benefit from the accessibility Power Automate offers, especially when users need to trigger actions right from Microsoft Teams or SharePoint. That's fine. The mature approach isn't exile, it's division of labor. Use Power Automate for human interaction points and Logic Apps for the actual heavy lifting. In other words, keep the toddler for buttons, call the adult for machinery. And that's exactly where we're heading next, the hybrid pattern that lets you keep your convenience while finally achieving scale. Because real professionals know you can't automate maturity, but you can definitely architect for it. The hybrid power user pattern. Here's the part where diplomacy meets engineering, because while it's satisfying to say, throw everything into Logic Apps, the real world is full of users who love their little blue flows. They click buttons in Teams, approve requests on their phones, and feel empowered. You can't rip that out overnight without creating mutiny. The smart move is hybrid architecture. Power Automate on the front end, Logic Apps running the muscle behind it. Think of it like a two-stage rocket. The first stage is Power Automate. Light, quick, disposable. It captures the trigger, the button press, the form submission, the record update. Then, instead of personally hauling all that data through a maze of connectors, it hands the payload to Logic Apps via an HTTP call. Logic Apps takes over, processes the heavy workload, and reports back when the job's done. Separation of concern achieved. The immediate benefit is predictable. User familiarity meets scalable execution. The average employee still clicks their recognizable request access flow, blissfully unaware that Azure just lifted 100 times the weight behind the scenes. IT, meanwhile, gets monitoring, governance, and sanity. Everyone wins, except the person who insists on keeping a single monolithic automated labyrinth because it looks organized. Let's walk through a real pattern. A Power Automate flow triggers when a new SharePoint item is added for approval. Instead of looping through every related file, it sends a structured payload, metadata, file IDs, request details to a Logic App endpoint secured with Azure Active Directory. Logic Apps picks up the baton, spins up parallel branches, processes hundreds of approvals, updates Dataverse, and sends summarized notifications back to Power Automate for the final alert. The user sees one tidy completion message while the backend performs industrial choreography. This approach also reduces licensing drama. Remember the per user versus per flow mess? By pushing computation into Logic Apps, you effectively offload processing costs to Azure's consumption pricing. It turns the unpredictable licensing equation into a measurable cost per execution. Finance might even clap, though quietly, because finance doesn't emote. Monitoring gets cleaner too. Power Automate can stay pretty for users, while Logic Apps connects to application insights for operational telemetry. You can trace latency, retry attempts, or failure rates across entire environments. It's like peeking inside the brain instead of just checking whether the lights are on. Security-wise, there's elegance in separation. Power Automate uses personal or service account-based connectors, which is fine for benign tasks but risky for system-level operations. Logic Apps, on the other hand, leverages managed identity to authenticate securely across Azure services. No stored secrets, no password expiry surprises. Configured properly, the hybrid link acts like a secure handoff between a friendly kiosk and a locked server room. Of course, this requires discipline. You can't just slap call Logic App into a random flow and declare success. You need standardized templates, naming conventions, environment variables, and an architecture document your successors can actually read. Otherwise, your department ends up with 50 half-documented HTTP calls crossing tenants like spaghetti cables. Professionals design integration like electrical wiring, not an accident waiting to happen. And please, stop stacking condition blocks in Power Automate like nesting dolls. If your flow has nested branches deeper than your monitor is tall, you've crossed a line. Take the logic out, code it cleanly in Logic Apps, and keep Power Automate for what it does best: human interaction. Over-engineering in Power Automate is less clever, more masochistic. The hybrid model is the adult compromise, user comfort up front, structural integrity behind the curtain. So next time someone insists, Power Automate can handle it, don't argue. Smile knowingly and send them a migration plan. They'll thank you later, typically around the time their 10th retry loop fails and your hybrid system just keeps running. The professional mandate. Let's finish where we should have started. Power Automate isn't broken. It's just being abused. It was designed for prototypes and personal productivity, the quick wins that save minutes, not the architectures meant to sustain enterprises. If you treat it like an integration backbone, it will snap. Real professionals know the difference between convenience and competence. Power Automate gives you simplicity. Logic Apps gives you control. When scale matters, you pick control every time. Because uptime, traceability, and predictable cost are not optional. They are the foundations of trust in automation. The next step is obvious. Audit every flow you have. Find the ones quietly burning through premium licenses or failing silently overnight. Migrate their heavy lifting to Logic Apps, reinforce their triggers, and give your business a system that behaves like it belongs in 2024. Your users still click buttons. Your infrastructure stops pretending. If this saved you time or embarrassment, subscribe. Tap follow, enable notifications, and get the next breakdown before your workflows implode at 3 a.m. Consider it preventative maintenance for your career.